by Japan. You can get the train from St. Pancras Station itself. You can actually get a Japanese-made train. It's kind of funny because the Britons actually invented the trains and had the first trains going, right? With Stevenson, remember all that stuff they used to make back in the 19th century? Well, now they're buying the trains off of Japan. So I don't know why Stephen Fry's making these comments, but he did. So now the BBC's canceled his show, and I have no idea why. But they've decided to cancel a show with Stephen Fry where he was going to film a documentary in Japan. This comes after the BBC apologized for their description of a double Hibakushi man being the unluckiest man in the world. And basically, a spokesperson for the BBC said the filming schedule of the documentary Fry was going to film about language called Planet World was now being altered. Alright? And basically the broadcaster, the BBC, this is the BBC from England, said it recognized the strength of feeling that had been caused by the show. Alright, kind of interesting to show that they made the comments about double Hibakushi. Kind of interesting, huh? Well, I think it's interesting because these Brits are just as bristly as some of these Japanese about their nationality. So I think you got to be careful what you say about other people's nationalities because there'll be 1 or 2% of the population that just don't like it too much, and that's what happened in this case. So, no Stephen Fry in Japan. Bad luck. And that's a contribution from a member of the Tokyo Forum by the name of Daijobu desu ka. He is a funny guy. He me. Okay, now I want to talk about advertising in Japan. Nope, I don't mean you advertising. I'm talking about a giant chocolate advertising in Japan. It's kind of interesting. But basically there is a huge, giant chocolate bar. Right? Like a giant candy bar. And actually, it's not a candy bar. It's actually a huge billboard. It's right near a Meiji chocolate factory, right? It's in Osaka, right? It ain't in Tokyo, right? It's much farther away from where I live. It's kind of interesting. The sign is 166 meters wide, 28 meters high. Okay? It's made of 42 plastic blocks, and they look like chocolate pieces in a giant candy bar. Kind of interesting. It covers the outer wall of the factory, which makes the chocolate. And people passing by from Tokyo, or going to Tokyo on the GR Tokaido and the Hankyu Kyoto lines, will be able to see it. Interesting. Now, what's interesting about this ad is in Japan is it's a giant piece of chocolate bar. And they love the chocolates over here. You got no idea, man. They're eating the chocolates all the time, right? So this is going to be a great eye-opener for those people catching the trains loving the chocolates. Interesting. Okay, everyone, time to hear about Overheard in Roppongi Town. This is a section where I walk down the streets of Roppongi and I like to hear what people have got to say. Sometimes I get it from friends who roll around and, over some other part of the city. Sometimes I like to just tell you what is being heard in Roppongi Town. Well, I have to say, last week, Joe heard about a British guy walking down the streets of Roppongi town talking to someone about how much it costs to buy the sex, right? This guy wanted to buy the sex. It's kind of common in Roppongi town, but if you gotta listen to Tokyo Joe, let me tell you, I know Tokyo, and this ain't the place to be buying sex, alright? Those of you desperate enough to be buying sex, I'd recommend about 100 other countries first. But if you gotta buy it in Japan, you gotta buy it in Tokyo, do not do it in Roppongi town, right? Because you ain't always gonna get what you think you're gonna get. And anyway, this guy was walking down the street talking about buying the sex. What he doesn't know, he'll end up with a saggy-titted mainland Chinese or a saggy-titted 50-year-old Filipino. Alright, everyone. Time to talk about a subject dear to Tokyo Joe's heart, and that's bald people in Tokyo town. Last week we spoke about the bearded folks here. This week we're talking about the baldy folks. A lot of baldy folks here from Europe and other countries. They like to come here and sun their head in the hot Japanese sun. I get that, you know. But I want to know from you, the listeners, and the viewers of the Tokyo Forum podcast, who do you think is the most famous bald man of the GAIJIN community of Tokyo town? You tell Tokyo Joe here on the forum. We'll start a thread, or you can just post it straight underneath the podcast thread itself. Who is the most famous bald man of Tokyo town that you know? I would have to say my nomination will go to the British guy who jumped into the moat and skinny dipped in the Japanese Imperial moat before he was collared by the 50 Japanese police. It's kind of probably the most famous baldy guy. In fact, the guy had no hair on him at all, as far as we could tell. Maybe you know someone. Maybe you're a baldy man, or maybe you know someone who's a baldy man. I want to know who is the most famous baldy man of Tokyo town. Maybe it's just you. Take a look in the mirror. Have you ever wondered what kind of whiskey was being drank by Bob Harris's character, played by the famous comedian Bill Murray in Lost in Translation? Well, you're in luck, as I posted a review of this. It's the Suntory Hibiki 17 whiskey. Take a look at the review. It's on the Tokyo Forum, www.thetokyoforum.tk. By the way, those of you listening to this on the YouTube, make sure you subscribe, friend me, rate me up, do whatever you have to do to make yourself feel good. Tell your friends about Tokyo Joe. I know Tokyo. You go to the review, I talk about drinking the Hibiki 17. I buy bottles of this stuff from